Hi everybody, today I'm going to be showing you how I made this shale chippings texture using eggshell. Hope you enjoy. So first thing we're going to do obviously is we're going to get some eggshells. We're going to give them a good rinse in the sink, make sure they're perfectly clean, and I'd recommend you leave them to dry overnight so that when we come to the next stage they are perfectly dry and they're going to be a lot easier to work with. Once we've got our eggshells, we're going to put them into a container and we're just going to break them up until they're at the size that we want for our surface. Obviously, everybody is going to be working at different scales, so just keep grinding these down until you think that they're suitable. This is why I say to really make sure the eggshells are dry. If they're not and there is any moisture, they're going to stick to the sides of the container and it's going to be a little bit harder to work with. So do make sure they're as dry as you can before you do this. Once you've got the mixture to the right consistency, we're going to put in some glue and we're going to mix that up. We don't want this texture to be too runny, especially if we're putting this on a plateau or a platform surface. So just add a little bit of glue at a time until you're happy with the consistency. We're looking for all the shell to be stuck together into effectively a paste, but it's not running or flowing too much anywhere. Once we've got that consistency, we're going to apply it to our surface. There's nothing too technical with this. You are just literally slapping it on. So I've jumped straight to showing you the texture when it's fully dried, as you can see on the screen now. The only thing to really be mindful of as you're waiting for this texture to dry is that if any air bubbles form on the surface, you just pop those as you go. I didn't have much problem with this when I was doing it, but I know in the past some big bubbles have dried in the glue, and that does come out in the final texture, so just be aware of that. Once the texture has dried, then it's pretty much our standard paint scheme. So we're going to prime that. With this texture, I've actually got some acrylic primer and I've applied it with a brush so that it gets really good coverage and goes into all the little gaps. A spray can, I would imagine you'd waste quite a lot doing that. Once you've finished applying the primer, all I've done with this texture is I've applied a base coat, so I've gone for a blue-grey kind of slate colour. I've then gone in with a Citadel Nuln Oil wash. That'll get into all the little gaps and create shadows, make sure I haven't missed anything if the primer hasn't worked effectively. Once that's dry, it's simply a case of picking out the texture with a couple of different dry brush layers. So the first one I've applied is a lighter shade of the base coat, and then the second one I've applied is a light grey just to pick up some of the highlights and give the impression that the surface is uneven. Nothing really complicated with the paint scheme here. So there we go, that's how to create slate chippings using eggshell. Really simple texture, there's nothing complicated with this at all. It's very much a textural paste kind of approach. You're just slapping it on and making sure that it's sculpted around whatever features that you need. I've said that these are slate chippings in the video. That's what they've resembled with the paint scheme that I've gone for, but they could very easily be, a bit of a riverbed. They could be any kind of generic ground texture that you're adding coverage over. It's quite versatile, and a really good side of it is that it's super strong and tough as well. So you can actually drill into this if you need any really rigid fixings. So there we are. There's how to create slate chippings using eggshell. Hope you've enjoyed.